Hey guys, how's it going? So, Pablo back here with Meditation Amsterdam, and we are in the process of reviewing The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. These are conversations with Joseph Campbell recorded by Phil Cousineau. And I'm just picking out quotes and interesting bits of the book instead of doing a formal review. And as per my previous video, I'm going to be doing these shorter clips which makes it a lot easier for me to try and do this every day. I'm not committing to doing it every day. This is just the second day that I do it in a row, and setting the bar low makes me, want to just keep doing it on an ongoing basis. So that's really cool. Works for me anyway. And what I thought I'd comment on today was a theme that keeps coming back here and there in the book, and that is the theme of surrender, and how yielding to life is a skill in and of itself, and it can deliver a lot of interesting results that can't possibly be achieved through willpower and effort. So if we keep the red thread that perhaps unifies all these conversations throughout the channel, you have at the very foundation of reality the idea of the yin and the yang. And what you will notice is that in the West, our mode of thinking and the way in which we approach life has become very imbalanced, because it's too oriented towards the yang. So the yang is the masculine energy that is focused on doing, focused on achieving. It is more linear in its nature, and it is very active. And the yin is the opposite, is the receiving energy. So that's the female side of things. So the female is the receiving energy. It is, instead of linear, it's more sort of circular, or is more sort of surface-like, if you will, because it is, instead of being the mountain, which is the yang, it is the valley, it's the extensive valley out of which the mountain can rise. And so it's more accommodating, congenial. It makes connections as opposed to setting direction and focusing on achievement. And it is the non-doing. So if you take the yin and how to exercise it, one of the things to do, of course, is meditation, as a matter of fact. So meditation is the ultimate yin activity. It is the cessation of activity, as a matter of fact. And when you go, the deeper your meditation goes, the more activity ceases, to the point where, if you are somewhat advanced or very advanced, even your breath will cease for minutes at a time. Some yogis stop breathing for very long periods of time. And what is maintaining the organism at that point is pure consciousness and mind power, and electromagnetism, for lack of a better description. So you're no longer depending even on oxygen, because your system has found such a floor of activity that maybe your heart will pump, once or twice every minute. Your brain waves have become all but flat, and so your system is just not consuming energy, is not doing anything. It's I can't say that I have reached these long periods of cessation, but I have reached what is known in yogic terms, if you look at pranayama, so the yogic science of breath, as the Kevala Kumbhaka. So the regular Kumbhaka, if you will, or the one that you exercise at will, is the holding of the breath, either at the top of the exhale, or at the top of the inhale, or at the bottom of the exhale. But the Kevala Kumbhaka is when you are breathing ever more smoothly and slowly, and in this circular pattern. So you're not breathing like this, but you're breathing very smoothly like this. And these waves start to become smaller and smaller and smaller, until you're barely breathing in or out. And then at some point it's completely interrupted, and it's totally still. And it's interesting, because it's not just the breath that is still, but the mind is also completely devoid of thought, and you can observe it. And you can observe your body, for example, and it's just awareness that's there. It's very beautiful. And so as we talk about meditation, then yielding becomes a very interesting thing, because if you approach meditation from a yang perspective, in other words, with the spirit of doing and forcing and sort of cajoling the mind left or right, or trying to make yourself to stop thinking, you're going to run into a lot of resistance. The mind carries a momentum that is tremendous. So the thinking mind and the emotions and all these things that mingle with one another in there are impossible to stop at will. Willpower has no bearing whatsoever when you're talking about meditation and when you're talking about inner work. Willpower works on the outside. When you talk about the inner, forget it. It's not going to happen. And it's one of the reasons why when you talk about the limbs of yoga, so you have the yamas and the niyamas, so the observances and the practices, and you have then the asana, which is the postures, and pranayama, which is the breath, and then you have pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses. And so you keep progressing in those from gross to subtle. And all of the ones that I've mentioned are things that you can sort of manipulate. So you can sit and try to bring your awareness back to your point of meditation, which could be the breath, for example. And those are things you can do. But the actual meditation, so what yoga refers to as meditation proper, is not something that you can do. It's just a state that you can try to cultivate by nudging the mind left or right until it kind of keeps wiggling less and less and less and less, more or less in the way that I described about the breath, and then it's on point, and then it does it on its own, as a matter of fact. So meditation is not something you do. It's a number of things that you undo in order for that state to occur on its own, and it takes time for that to happen. Okay, so yielding is a big thing in meditation, but also in life, because we are meditating not for its own sake, but to elicit a certain quality in our lives, in our minds. And so a quote that I can read to you, I'll read two quotes, which I think are, one of them is just a little bit more profound, and the other one equally profound, but also funny. And so it says, one part of the mythological motif of the hero's journey is acquiescence. You'll remember that Joseph Campbell was a mythicist, and so when he talks about a hero's journey, he talks about the mythological aspect of it. And so acquiescence, right? Yielding. The hero is the one who knows when to surrender and what to surrender to. This is kind of reminiscent of that phrase of, Lord, give me wisdom to accept what I can't change and change what I can accept. So when there's something that you truly can't change, that's the moment at which you completely embrace it and accept it. The main theme is to yield your position to the dynamic. And the dynamic of life is now this form eats form, yield. By this form eats form as the dynamic of life now, he's talking about nature. He's talking about the game of life and the game of the antelope and the tiger, for example, and these kind of things, right? So these forms are eating one another, and that's this dynamic of life to which we need to yield. And that in essence means, it's interesting because when you yield to the reality of life, you are embracing it fully for what it is, as opposed to trying to escape from it. So rather than this trap, this spiritual trap that many of us fall into when we start with this path, we consider yielding as saying, oh, I don't care anymore. You know, I'm above hard work, or I am above material possessions and money and all these kind of things. But that's not yielding. That's escapism, right? That's kind of spiritual bypass of life. Yielding means that you observe life as it truly is, and you yield to it, so you accept it as it truly is. And life as it truly is right now is form eats form, meaning there is a competitive dynamic to it of which you are part, and you must be formidable at that game. That's part of the true spirituality. So there is another book, it'll come back to me, and it mentions that being irresponsible or lack of taking responsibility is the ultimate spiritual failure, as a matter of fact, right? And then there's this other really cool phrase about yielding that I thought exemplifies it, but it also tells you something about the power of yielding. And so he's talking about the astronauts in the space program, and it says, I can remember the space flight. I don't know which number it was, before the one with Armstrong stepping on the moon. when as the astronauts were coming down, ground control in Houston asked, who's navigating now? And the answer that came back was Newton, right? Meaning it's the laws of physics now. There's zero control. We're at the mercy of, well, wherever this thing goes. And you know, if it burns to a crisp in midair or in, you know, as in re-entry, then that's it. You're done. And talk about ultimate surrender. Talk about putting yourself in a situation which is, on the one hand, incredibly interesting, and it's the ultimate adventure. I mean, I remember as a kid, what I wanted to be when I grew up was an astronaut, as a matter of fact. So that to me is the ultimate adventure, is stepping out of planet Earth. But the cost at which it comes, and as with many of the true adventures of life, is you need to be all in, and you need to relinquish control completely, and need to say, this is it. This is me putting my hands at the mercy of this situation here, which I've tried to at least somehow arrange in a good way. But beyond that, here we go. There's zero control. And what is also interesting about this is that it makes you realize that at the end of the day, your degree of control in life is minimal, if at all existent, right? There's no real control to be spoken of. I think you can nudge things left or right, as with meditation, but ultimately there's a momentum and there's a certain reality that carries a course. So the way of the Tao, if you will, as it unfolds, and your little human will is nothing compared to that, right? And so you are much better off putting yourself in accord with that flow of the Tao, rather than to trying to cajole things into a certain situation that you want. So that's it for tonight. That was a little talk about Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, and the theme of yielding and whether you're really in control or not. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next video. Cheers.